Welcome back to Making Stuff with Mr. Hoon. This particular episode is dedicated to my Painting 1 students. Painting 1 and Drawing 1 are both exploring the idea of pattern, and their learning targets are on their Google Classroom with Mr. Hoon. However, I thought that I would take one of my original pieces that I'm working on now to illustrate, quite literally, the idea that mixed media involves drawing and painting, and also representational imagery like this clear representation of a wind-up robot can merge with and accentuate pattern, as we find here, or it can be accentuated by pattern. So in this mixed media piece, I'm combining traditional Celtic knotwork with my symbolism that I've been exploring for the past few years in my fatherhood series, where I take toys, children's toys, and juxtapose them, place them compared to, adjacent to, next to, offset by imagery that speaks to adulthood. So you have this push and pull, this tension between the innocence of childhood and the complexity of adulthood. And some pieces are more personal than others. This is pretty straightforward. It's a representational image of this wind-up robot that I love so much. And of course, I have, as I've explained earlier, pattern in the outside, and we're going to use drawing techniques and painting techniques to explore this intricate border and enhance the drawing within. Now, you look here that there's blues and golds represented. This is all done in colored pencil. And down here, I'm going to explore watercolor, but I want to review with my painting class a watercolor palette. Now, if we look at this watercolor palette, we can see my tube colors here. And let's remember that intensity of color matters. We have here tube intensity. And we have here a brown wash. The wash is like a lake of pigment. Now, when you apply that lake of pigment to watercolor paper or your support that you're working on, whatever that may be, it's going to be more transparent. And when you apply thicker paint, naturally that's going to be more intense. And we have to remember that there's three properties of color. Value, that's the amount of lightness of color. Intensity, and that's how saturated the color, how close it is to the original color category. And then, of course, hue, which is the color category. There's traditionally 12 in the color wheel or the spectrum, the rainbow. Your primary colors, your secondary colors, your tertiary colors. Primary like red, blue, and yellow. Secondary orange, green, and purple. And then you have your red violets and your blue violets and your orange yellows and all that kind of stuff for your tertiaries. So I'll take this out of the way. This is not what I'm going to be working with it today in my painting. I'm going to be exploring more metallic colors. Now, remember, you get to do whatever design you want. The learning target is real clear in that I'm just expecting you to explore pattern. If you want to stick with straight pattern, that's great. If you want to combine it with representational drawing, that's fine too. But I want to talk a little bit about this very expensive metallic watercolor paint. You'll see that there's bits of mineral. Well, maybe you can't see that, but I'm telling you, there's, at the microscopic level, bits of mineral that reflect and refract and bend light. So it's going to be more opaque, meaning it's not as transparent. We're not going to create a wash or a lake of color because we're dealing with illustration board. The illustration board is thicker, but it's not watercolor board. And also, it's not taped appropriately. It doesn't have gum of Arabic tape around it or even masking tape. I've got a couple pieces of Gorilla Tape here to hold it down. So what I'm saying is, if we create the paint too thin, number one, it's going to be very transparent, and here in my borderland, where I have I'm going to have my intense pattern work, I want that color to be intense, fully intense, and opaque. I don't want things to show through, and I don't want to mix the color in the human eye. I want to mix it on the palette and put straight tube intensity paint there. So I'm just going to use a little bit of water and pretty much put it right into the pigment and just sauce it up, get it all saucy. You can see, if I bring this up a little bit, my pattern work down here, my Celtic knot work. Now, granted, the camera's elevated so you can see the whole thing. So you're going to lose a little bit of the detail. I will say that as you explore the knot work, like the various YouTube videos that I've placed on the assignment page on Google Classroom, you'll see that there are places where overlapping occurs. And I originally did this in graphite pencil. And I'm going to start with my lightest color, and that's typically what one does with watercolor. And where they overlap, there's a little space. It shows the white paper. And that space is there for a reason. It's to suggest, what if I didn't paint over this and use different colors? If I just use pencil, I want to show that it's overlapping. So there's going to be a break where the knot work braids over the underline. So what we're shooting for here is a really rich, thick, opaque gold. And I'm using gold because I'm mirroring the inside color scheme. We've got this blue and this gold, and we've got a little bit of red. And you're going to find that throughout in the border, so that the border accentuates the central piece. It matches, so to speak. Now, to eliminate the amount of talking, just know this. Gold in the braid work, and then as you can see here, we've got darker values. We've got this darker value of gold, and then we have this copper and this bronze. And I'm going to use all four of these, because where this overlaps, there's going to be, presumably, if I want to show a little bit of depth in the braid work, there's going to be overlapping, and it'll cast a slight shadow, so I'll use the darker values there. I'm going to speed the camera up. Unfortunately, you won't hear this wonderful tune in the background. The space rock band Osric Tentacles, they've been around since 1982, English band. When I cut it and I speed the frames up, I will take the sound out, maybe put something over the top of it. Anyway, I want to thank you for being with me. You're going to see this develop here. Then as we move through this, we're going to see this drawing develop. Now, just understand this. Every time you have a session with Mr. Hoon, I'm going to have clear expectations. Now, you don't have to photograph all your practice work. I'm expecting you to photograph it and submit to Google Classroom, if you're in my class, a photographic document for each learning target that I give you. Or I may give you 3 learning targets. But the point is, they're going to be very clear on Google Classroom. But for this, I thought I'd just give you a little bit of a technique session. Again, main ideas, opacity, meaning opaque, not see-through, straight paint, tube paint, or in this case, this puck of paint here. We're going just a little bit of water into the paint so that it's more opaque and less see-through. And then we're going to explore darkness in the background like we have darkness here, so that gold braid work really pops. So thanks for being with Making Stuff with Mr. Hoon. I'm looking forward to your own work and your own practice and images of that. So great working with you. I want to point out that there's this idea of pulling paint, and if you've been in my painting class, the physical studio, you've worked with me before, you know that when we're talking about detail, we're talking about control, and control of your painting implement, your tool. And in this case, in order to get a sharp line of paint, I need to drag the paint to the tip of the bristle on the brush. And I do that by pulling the paint, not pushing it, pulling the paint. So I'm constantly readjusting my hand position, my wrist position, in order to achieve that aim. I move the camera, maybe it'll sparkle a little for you. Or if I slightly move the table. There it is. Take a closer look. There we go. All right, Mr. Hoon signing off, and I'll come back at you at a later date. We'll start doing some, well, I'm going to go to my drawing class next, and we'll do some pencil work exploring pattern and detail, incorporating this representational drawing with a strict mathematical pattern. Thanks so much for listening, and Mr. Hoon signing off.